Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening to the 129th episode of the Athletes Podcast, featuring Jason Hardrath, an incredible athlete who's summited Washington's 100 tallest peaks in 50 days, 23 hours. Jordan Maslin, this guy's incredible.
Oh, man, he was nuts. He was like a very exciting guy to listen to. And, you know, we were talking to them, and even at the end of the podcast, you were just saying, like, man, like after listening to this, like I got to go climb a summit.
Right?
I got to do something, you know?
An incredible athlete. We should talk about some other incredible athletes and what happened in the past week of sports. Golden State Warriors took the W over the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals, winning 4-2 pretty handedly.
Yeah. I mean, all I know about that is after the game, what's his name?
Klay Thompson.
Yeah, Klay Thompson was just calling out that guy with his stupid tweet. Just like, oh, strength in numbers. Like, such a stupid tweet. I can't wait to retweet that after it. And I was like, oh, man. Like, that's all I know about the NBA championship game.
There's basketball players like to talk, and you know some athletes like to talk, and
I think that when teams like defeat, especially the Golden State Warriors, with like the team they have, I'm assuming they just, you know, they're high on life, and some people just like to tweet about it right away. They win a game and they just brag about it.
Yeah, it happens in the world of sports. People are competitive, and if you get a dub, you want to make sure the other team knows it. But you don't want to necessarily poke the bear in the Golden State Warriors because they have 4 championships now for a reason.
That's crazy.
You know who's almost one win away from a championship is the Colorado Avalanche. They took down the Tampa Bay Lightning last night. They have a 3-1 series lead. Nazem Kadri comes back, scores the OT winner.
2 best teams like facing head to head. The games have been amazing. I'm really happy to see that Nazem Kadri came back. Yeah, honestly exciting, and I do hope he wins Stanley Cup. I do hope they win it all, and we'll see how it goes. Anyways, on to Game 5.
Yeah, well, the awards were given out for the NHL's regular season.
Yep.
Austin Matthews cleaned up, wins the Hart, the Ted Lindsay. Cale Makar wins the Norris by a hair. Igor Shesterkin takes home the Vezina, which was pretty incredible. He's just a phenomenal goaltender. You know, I have a soft spot for goalies.
I know you do.
I had to, give him a little extra pat on the back. Moritz Seider takes home the Calder. He deserved it. That guy's going to be a beast for the next decade and a half in the NHL. What were your thoughts?
It's really difficult because, you know, you do have a lot of people saying that Connor McDavid, for example, he had like 129, 130 point season, something. So, I mean, you know, you could always make, it's close, and, you know, that's why they have the votes. You can always make arguments for some players over others. And obviously I might be biased just bringing up Austin Matthews, but he's the first player in Leafs history to score 60 goals. He had an amazing season. So, I mean, I think that he's well-deserved the MVP. And I think that Cale Makar, you said it was by a hair that he won the Norris, eh? I
remember it wasn't
like too
I
much.
mean, well, Roman Josi put up something crazy, like 90-something points on the Nashville Predators, was the highest scoring player on that team.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know what? He has... let's put it this: we've seen him in the playoffs, we've seen him in the Stanley Cup Finals, and man, Cale Makar is more than just delivering for that team. So, of course, like these players, well deserved. It was great. Did you see the first in NHL's first star and second All-Star teams? I
did not.
They had for the first All-Star team, I believe that when they posted, they had Matthews and Marner both on the first All-Star team. They had McDavid on the second one, and apparently bringing up McKinnon not even up there. So, I mean, again, it's obviously something that's up for the debate. If you're a fan of your team, you're a fan of Colorado, you do want to be seeing people like McKinnon thinking, oh, yeah, he should obviously make the team. It's just pretty crazy. Like, again, I'm happy to see what the Leafs are doing, but all in all, we discussed this like 2 podcasts ago, man. It's great that we have all these awards and everything, but they had a comedian up in the ceremony who mentioned that
it's nice to see some
Matthews win in June. It's like, oh,
I was just gonna say it's nice to see the Maple Leafs win in June.
Exactly, right. So I mean, that's what we're all hoping for here, is just a Stanley Cup. But no, it's great to see a lot of the players winning these amazing awards.
Yeah, Roman Josi, 96 points, 10 more than Matt Duchene, who was the second highest scoring player on the Nashville Predators. Connor McDavid with 123 points. Ridiculous stats. I believe he was plus 28.
A lot of Canadian hockey team, a lot of Canadian players on there. You know, Johnny Gaudreau is up there too. So
I think the market that you play in plays a factor. And
I agree.
when you are down in Denver, Colorado, you might not get as much attention as you do in Edmonton or Toronto. So
yeah.
I mean, McKinnon had a bit of a loss during the regular season awards, but I think if he takes home a Stanley Cup,
He's not
I don't think he
complaining at
really
all.
is going to care whatsoever.
He's got the best one of them all.
In other news, Matt Fitzpatrick wins the U.S. Open over Will Zalatoris. Another nail biter.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy golf over the past 4 days. There's a lot going on in sports just in general. It's a great time to be a sports fan. You got to watch your first TFC game last night. How was that?
First TFC game live. It was good. I mean, you know, the stadium wasn't sold out, but you still have a section. There's just a group of people, like the crowd. And if you've been to the game, obviously, you know what I'm talking about. They're just on their feet for 90 minutes. Like 3 or 4 of them have instruments. And like they're so well coordinated. It's like they have practices for this, man. Like they actually, you know, I got to admit, they actually sound good and they bring a lot of vibe, a lot of energy into that stadium. But aside from that, I got to see the TFC win 4-0 against the Montreal Impact in the Canadian Cup semifinals. So I know they have the second game going on today with the Whitecaps and York FC. I have a feeling Whitecaps are going to win that, so I know we'll probably see TFC Vancouver Whitecaps championship for the title. So it was exciting, though, honestly.
I think soccer in Canada is growing.
It is.
Obviously, it's a major sport around the world, but specifically in Canada with low barriers to entry and so many more teams playing now and it becoming more of a regular sport on TV, people are paying attention and they're excited about it, to say the least. 54-minute conversation coming up here with Jason Hardrath. But before, we also have to mention that Max Verstappen, did I say his name right?
Verstappen, you got it.
Nice. He won the Canadian Grand Prix.
He wins another one.
He's good. He's a good driver.
Yeah, that race kind of had him in the lead for the majority of it. I'll actually say I got it spoiled by Dave here when I was watching it. Not his fault or anything like that, but it was a Father's Day one, and there was like 12 laps to go, and there was a safety car, and I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be an amazing race. I'm so pumped for this. And like we had to stop, go in and eat dinner for Father's Day. And then I come out, look at my phone, and Dave just sent me a text message with Max Verstappen as the winner. He's like, just mentioning something about a post. I'm just like, nuts. It's just like
I take zero blame. This is the era of social media. If you don't want to know the score, don't look at your phone.
You got to watch it live. Like that's it, right?
Hey, I don't PVR stuff for a reason. You know what? It's in the moment. We're focusing on being present. We were present for this conversation with Jason. Just craziness what he is able to accomplish.
Yeah.
An incredible story. I highly recommend you check out the show notes where Jordan's going to link all of the different movies, documentaries, snippets that Jason has been a part of. Pretty incredible. We also talk about Athletic Brewing and some of his other partners. Mm-hmm. Feel free to check them out. Jordan will drop in a link as well so that you can get some money back on Athletic Brewing, get you some non-alcoholic beers. So without further ado, let's hit up the 129th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Jason Hardrath. Here we go. 129 episodes. Jason Hardrath, thank you so much for being a part of the journey. It's absolutely crazy. 2.5 years. I'm really excited for this episode to be able to share a bit of your story, who you are. You are the individual that loves to share stories that brands can tell through their own. And not only are you an athlete, but you're an adventure seeker, a speaker, someone who's scaled Washington's 100th tallest mountains in 50 days, 23 hours, first person to 100 fastest known times. Incredible journey that you've been on, Jason. I'd love for you to set the stage and maybe introduce yourself in a bit more detail.
I mean, you did a pretty good flyby there. The recent years of my life, I've been pretty consumed with what are known as fastest known times. I mean, almost anybody who's an athlete that's out, running races and doing that kind of stuff has at least heard of them at this point, especially since the big boom in 2020. But prior to that, going back, I was just the annoying kid who couldn't sit still in class, couldn't sit down, couldn't shut up, couldn't remember homework. Bona fide ADHD back before it was cool to be ADHD. Not that it's cool now, but that's a funny way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really struggled to sit still. And so movement was really important to me from a really young age. And I kind of found a forum after, like failing at school, failing at relationships, failing at a lot of different stuff because of being impulsive and unable to like focus on things other people wanted me to focus on. Discovering athletics as a way to express myself in a way that was positive, that was like, hey, I can actually be good at something. And so the first thing I got into was skating. Spent some years as a little skater punk, but like not the typical I want to just sneak off and try to do drugs. Like I wanted to skate all day, and by skate all day I meant skate all day. And just went for it really hard. And then broke a wrist in middle school, and the parents were kind of sick of me sneaking off and skating all day anyways, so they're like, no more skating while you're in this house. And then I discovered running, and running just became sort of this focus. I set this goal to break a 6-minute mile before I was out of middle school, and succeeded at it in the final PE mile of the year. And I was like a really just like, talk about like wire your brain to be like goal oriented, and to like believe that, okay, if you're willing to put in the work, you can achieve the goals you set. So, one thing led to another, where it's like, okay, I want to run on varsity in high school. Okay, now I want to get to state. All right, I want to get onto a college team. It's like, and I had reality checks, right? Where it's like, I'm not some elite level athlete. I thought, oh, I'm going to break my school record in the 1500. I never came close to that record. And so I had that reality check, but it's like, you need some of that to be able to go, okay, this is not something that I have an infinite potential in, but what is it I have potential in? And, a lot of people lose heart in that moment, the moment they find out like, oh, I'll never be the best, so I might as well quit. But instead I just kept finding angles and ways to keep pursuing what was meaningful to me. And the next step that was meaningful to me was, okay, can I get onto a college team, even just a tiny college team, and get paid to run? That was the way I thought of it back then, paid to run, get a scholarship for college. And I managed to succeed at that and get onto a college team. And I mean, I like marketed myself really well at a time when kids weren't doing that yet. Like now every kid has highlight reels of their high school career. But back then, not really anybody was sending that out to coaches like, hey, here's videos of some of my best races and my times, And I managed to get myself onto a college team. But the punishment for marketing myself well was I ended up on a team with a bunch of guys that were all way stronger than me. And so I just had to suffer for 4 years just to hang on to that varsity spot and not lose my scholarship. And that was kind of like the fiery furnace, the fiery forge, that it was like, okay, I got myself into this and I love this. And so no matter how hard it gets, I'm just going to keep plugging forward. And I think that's what like built the fitness and built some of the resilience and the mental toughness, to be able to step into bigger things like marathons and Ironman triathlons. And then that's how I started forging my ultra endurance fitness, and got into ultra trail running. And then in 2015, I had a big car accident, rolled the car over, went out the window, should have died, broke 9 ribs, collapsed a lung, broke my shoulder in 2 places, and completely shredded the LCL and ACL of my right knee. A doctor told me, I brought up how much I loved doing these physical things, that it was like the only thing I did with my spare time. And he's like, oh yeah, you're going to let that part of your life go. And I just remember that sinking feeling. It's like, that was the only version of myself I had ever known, was this guy that was just active and expressing myself by finding the next challenge, the next physical challenge. And I remember just like my spirit sinking, but then in the next moment, that spirit of defiance popping up, where it's like, you don't know me. Like, you just wait. You don't know what I'm willing to do to achieve what I want to achieve. And so just leaned into PT and leaned into the struggle, of building my body back. And over the course of that, like I couldn't run, right? Because one of the slowest things to come back was the range of motion in my knee that had to be rebuilt. Because it was just swollen like a grapefruit and tightened up and full of scar tissue. And so I became a hiker. Like in my mind, it's like, okay, well, when you're hiking up and down hills, you don't need the same range of motion in your knee as when you're running. So I just started climbing steep hills. Hills led to mountains. Pretty soon I'm climbing big mountains instead of small mountains. And then I'm climbing mountains that have technical summit blocks where it's like you're doing rock climbing to achieve the summit. And so it's like, oh, I guess I'm a rock climber now because I want to be capable of climbing these peaks. I don't want to have to go up and be like, oh, I don't have the skills to get to the top of this, even though I hiked all the way up here. So I just delved into rock climbing. And so it's like, I'm doing this, I'm building these skills, all the rope skills and safety skills and climbing skills and the fitness and strength. I mean, I literally was the worst person in that gym. Just awful. 11-year-olds were better climbers than me in there. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so terrible. And I had to like sit with that and be willing to just suck at something new.
Yeah.
And so just kind of suffered with it. And I can still remember the first day someone was like, oh my gosh, how did you do that when I climbed a route? And I was like, oh, they think I'm good at what? Someone thinks I'm actually good at this.
Perspective.
It was a cool moment. It was a turnaround. But at the same time, like I'm doing all the rehab to get the knee back to where I can eventually run again. And so I'm like building these sort of simultaneous skills. And I get to this place where about 2 years into the recovery process, which is pretty usual for recovering from such a major, surgery, invasive surgery and all that. I get back to where I can go out and cruise like 10, 20 miles and my knee doesn't turn into a grapefruit. And it's like, okay, I'm not as fast as I used to be. I might not ever be as fast as I used to be, but at least I can go do stuff. And it's like, well, now I have this ability to climb technical peaks. So let's merge the two. Let's just pick like 3 epic technical peaks and just run in between them and see if I can tag all of them in a weekend as a weekend warrior and then go back to work on Monday, all ragged and haggard. And that's when I discovered fastest known times. And so it was just kind of like this realization where it's like, well, damn, this is what I'm doing every weekend anyways. Like I might as well make it into something, like be a part of a community and contribute and like break some records and add some new routes. And it's like, I already love this. So why not? And it's actually right away in the moment, I was like, I should go for 100 of these. And the idea kind of just stuck in my mind. And I was kind of like quiet about it because, I think the person with the most at that point had like 49 or 47. So it would have been pretty ridiculous to come out and say, I'm going to do 100 of these. So I just kind of started plugging away and was like, oh yeah, I'm going to see if I can get the most or whatever. But kind of almost from the beginning, I knew I wanted to do 100 of them because it would mean that I did 100 different amazing things that I wanted to do out in nature. It was about the experience. It was about the challenges I could face and how I'd have to grow and adapt as an athlete to take on repetitive new challenges and to find the new aesthetic line and link things together in fresh ways. Started this journey to 100 FKTs and eventually it ended up turning into the Journey to 100 film, which I'll make sure that there's a link for listeners to pop into and watch. And it covers a lot of the tail end of this progress to 100 FKTs and covers the story that, after I did 99 FKTs, the thing I did for my 100th was I tackled the 100 tallest peaks of the state of Washington as one FKT. And I say that clearly because sometimes people will get confused. They're like, oh, so you did the 100 peaks as your 100. No, I did 99 previous FKTs. And then for my 100th, I did 100 peaks.
Yes. Important.
There's the 30,000 foot flyover.
Hey, important distinction to make, but like crazy story from start to finish. Like when I was watching that film that you shared with me, Journey to 100, incredibly put together. The team behind it was phenomenal. I can't even imagine kind of what was involved to make it all occur. But I'm trying to wrap my head around, like, how does someone go from, I'm assuming, lying in the hospital bed, being told that they're never going to be able to do this again? Is this just instilled that you've been able to face adversity kind of from the time that you were young to be able to just say, hey, I can do this no matter what? Like, to your point, you don't know me and I'm going to be able to get after it and do this no matter what my body may or may not be able to do afterwards?
Well, I think to start simply, it was an agreement with myself and the underlying agreement. So it wasn't just a spirit of defiance. There was an underlying agreement, and the agreement was I'm not going to stop trying until I get back to doing some version of what I love.
Mm.
Right. Again, that reality check, like I talked about in high school, where it's like, oh, I'm never going to break the school record. It's like, okay, I might not ever qualify for an Ironman world championship again. Like I may never be that fast, but I'm not going to stop pushing forward until I find myself doing some version of what I love. And that was the agreement. That was the framework. That was the intention that I set. And then, I mean, there was obviously a lot of other work that had to go into, I mean, I think this is one of the beauties of being an athlete, right? Is what we're teaching ourselves is we're teaching ourselves how to endure more discomfort now for a better outcome later. And we're getting repetitive. Every workout, every rep of a workout sometimes is this expression, this practice of a belief that, okay, I can take this burden on my shoulders now to do more than, you know, other people seem to be willing to do, to get a result that other people won't get later. And so I kind of had that belief going in that it's like, okay, the reason this doctor is saying this to me is because most people, when they hurt this much and they're this damaged, aren't willing to go through the day-to-day discomfort to really drive themselves back to where they want to be. And I'm going to make damn sure I'm willing to do that. And I think, you know, there's a lot of previous practice that leads up to that, right? Like all those years of running in high school and running in college, where I practiced that. So it was already instilled. It was familiar. It wasn't like I was suddenly trying to change myself while I'm in pain. It was like I already was wired that way to understand that. And I think that's one of the powers that being athletic and getting out and training ourselves gives us, is that in a way we're creating small crises for ourselves when we go out and do these really hard breakthrough workouts. But that translates to life when we have these tragedies occur in our life that attempt to derail our lives from the direction we want them to go. We're able to transcend those moments with a sense of belief and a sense of trust in the process, in a way perhaps that those that aren't practiced struggle to.
Right.
And so I think that all ties in. And then I did this thing mentally where I still refer to any of my PRs, my records, my personal records from before the car accident, as my former life. I released that as an expectation, right? Like, oh yeah, in my former life, I could run a 2:30 or a 2:45 marathon. Can't do that now. Like that was my former life. And I don't measure myself against that. And that's kind of the gist of it. Cause it's like, you can, I guess you can think about it as, are you looking at the distance, the gap from where you hope you are, or are you noticing and celebrating your progress? And if I had in my mind always like, oh, I'm not going to be happy till I run a 250 marathon again. I'm not going to be happy till I, do a half Ironman in 419 again. If that was what was in my head, I would constantly be demotivating myself in the moment because it would feel like that was impossible, as opposed to being able to release all that and say, okay, that was my former life. This is the new me. I'm starting fresh. All I have is my process. Then I could celebrate like, oh, this is as much as I've ever bent my knee. This is as far as I've ever walked without my knee getting swollen and hurting. This is as fast as I've ever shuffle jogged, like noticing all those little things and being able to celebrate them as progress instead of just constantly go, well, yeah, but I'll never get back to this.
Right.
And I think that's really important when you face a huge setback in life, to be able to come with a fresh start. Like, yeah, I never owned my results. Those were never mine. We think we own that. Like, oh, I am this now. I'm a, such and such, I'm a 3-hour marathoner. I'm a Boston qualifier. We like want to self-describe as if that's a part of our innate person because we achieved it. It's like, no. What you own is the process that got you there. The results can be gone in an instant. And it really taught me like, okay, you better love your process and you better believe in your process, because really when push comes to shove, that's what you have.
Yeah.
And that was a huge learning from that experience.
It's really interesting because all of these, cliches, it's like celebrating the small wins and, enjoy the process. And I think it comes down to, you mentioned like how athletes tend to just be able to face this additional adversity and come prepared the next time better because they've faced it. And it almost comes down to just delayed gratification, because you know that if you put in the work now, it might hurt more, but eventually that pain will subside and I will come out on the other side. That was a Eric Thomas quote that I was listening to there. But I just love the energy that you bring to the table, because it's not common to see someone who's putting up these crazy numbers still get excited to come on a Zoom and have this conversation, because, you know, you're so used to having all of these tremendous feats. And like, I'm fascinated at how you were able to continue to pursue this well after celebrating those small wins obviously was integral to your continued to success. Was there ever a moment that it wavered? Were there ever those down times? And like, can you speak to maybe how you got out of them? Because I'm sure there might have been, and I'm sure you've got an incredible support network around you, but I think this is something that I want to touch on for that next generation of athletes, which is what we try and do on this podcast, is educate, entertain, and inspire them. And I think you could probably speak to maybe some of the not so glamorous moments throughout the process that are important to recognize, and to your point, begin to say, okay, this is a moment in time. I'm going to be able to move forward from this and look back and be pretty astonished at what I've been able to accomplish.
Absolutely. I mean, oh man, I've faced so many of these, you know, setbacks, and you have low moments, and you have days you wake up depressed. And I mean, I think the best way I can go about talking about this is, I think, as far as how to transcend those moments, right? Like, so you're going to end up going through lows, and you're go through lots of them in all sorts of different ways. Sometimes it'll be emotional or financial or whatever it may be. You're going to have a lot of things that try to derail you from where you hope to go. And I think for me, and I've brought this quote up pretty often since the Journey to 100 film came out. I had a mentor when I was a kid, and he shared a quote, a silly quote that just really stuck with me. And he said, human beings are like a tube of toothpaste. You find out what's truly inside when they get squeezed. And that struck me as very important, because, you know, when you're being measured, when you're being tested, whether it's a physical bout, like you're playing the hardest game of your life, you're doing the hardest workout of your life, you're having a breakthrough effort in a race, and it's pure suffering, the hardest you've ever gone, and you're doubting that you can continue all the way to the finish line with that level of effort. A lot of people, they're like, oh man, I can't wait till this is over. Like, oh yeah, burger and a beer later. It's like, no. Like, that part of the experience, that pain cave, that's a space you should want to be. That's a space you should, that's where you're really meeting yourself, right? Because anybody can be good when life is good to them. Anybody can be generous when everything's going right. The question that the quote begs is, who are you when you're stripped down to the raw core, when things aren't going your way, when life is throwing a wrench in your engine? It's like, who can you be in that moment? Are you still the person you hope to be, a person who you could see as admirable or chalk up as someone you could see as a hero in the moments you're at a low? And that really stuck with me. And then I had another experience that informs this as well. In college, I suffered with bouts of depression.
Okay.
And to me, you know, the opposite of being happy and being motivated isn't being sad. It's feeling nothing. It's feeling apathy. It's an absence. It's a lack of color. It's a hollowness. It's my favorite foods are tasteless. My favorite colors are colorless. There's no, you know, nothing has any meaning. That's the darkest, worst moments. And the thing to be avoided in daily existence is days that mean nothing and feel like nothing. And so even if you're having a terrible, hard, difficult experience that's visceral and powerful, and you're maybe, you know, I can think of times I've been scared out of my mind on the side of a mountain, like this could be it. This might be the end. Like, that's still a richer and better existence than feeling nothing.
So true.
And it's like, once you have a framework like that, suddenly it kind of flips all of this upside down, where you're like, oh, like these lows and these hard points, like I'm not wishing they were over. And, therefore, anytime I'm having a hard moment in life or in a workout or in an effort, I want to give up and I want to get out of it. Instead, it's like, oh, this is exactly where I wanted to be. This is the whole point why I'm here, is to see what there is to be learned in this moment about myself and about how I can be a better person, and about what I can carry out for other people to help them lift themselves. And to me, I think that like flips the equation, so that when you face those setbacks and those hard times and those negative moments, you have a framework for interpreting it that makes it a little less catastrophic. It gives you a reason to keep a direction,
keep moving forward. Absolutely. You mentioned heroes. Anyone that you grew up admiring, trying to emulate, someone who you're like, man, I wish I could just be like him or her?
I watched a lot of the Steve Prefontaine documentaries, like Without Limits and the Prefontaine film. Like I probably watched those 40 times before I graduated high school. So I loved that, like, lead from the gun, go all out, 100% all in type mentality that he historically exhibited. So I love, like, that was a character that definitely informed my sort of approach to how I approach these athletic related things. Beyond that, I mean, so many different names, because it's like now we're so much more connected than we used to be. It used to be like, like one or two like famous people doing something in a given field. Now it's like you can be personally in touch with like 85 different people. But athletes like Christoph Tuscher, he's an older guy who does really crazy stuff in the backcountry. Another guy, Ray Zahab, he like does deserts at their hottest and the Arctic and it's cold at its coldest. You can tell there's a trend here. I like extremes. Let's see here. Who else? Anton, his mixed style of, climbing and biking and running. So many. I could just keep going. I could just keep rattling names and be like, oh, a little influence here and a little influence there and a little influence there. But yeah, as far as like one person that I probably was influenced a lot by, even though I never met him, Steve Prefontaine from a young age.
It's interesting you bring up that obviously you're an extreme, you're a thrill seeker, and you mentioned that those days that mean nothing are the ones that you want to avoid more than anything. And I can imagine that on days that you're not summiting a mountain or scaling the face of a rock, you would kind of get that sense of feeling nothing if you're not pursuing those feats on a daily basis. Now, I know you've received the best PE teacher review for, probably the past decade, but I'd love for you to maybe shine light on what you do from a work standpoint as well, to maybe see the positives that come from a daily basis working with those students, for instance, because I'm sure there's some excitement that comes from working with kids that maybe isn't as exhilarating as scaling that rock face, but can probably come with its own set of challenges.
Well, they absolutely go hand in hand. I mean, I like to say that I teach what I love and I live what I teach, right? There's a reason I'm a PE teacher. There's a reason I specifically chose to not get a second endorsement, even though everybody told me like, oh, if you want to be sure that you'll get a job, get an endorsement in like English or math or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, but that means I could potentially get hired just to teach English or just to teach math. And I don't want that. I want to teach what I love. And so for me, going out and doing these exploits and doing these personal tests feeds right back into my teaching. And I think maybe to some degree, and this might help an athlete navigate in the future themselves, is I think a lot of athletes that do really big things and do go test themselves, sometimes it feels hollow and meaningless. Like, what's the point? Am I just like supposed to brag about it now? Like, what do I do with it now that I've done this thing? And it's to me, it's the hero's journey, right? It's like in America, we tend to focus a lot on the fact that the hero goes out and does the incredible feat of slaying the dragon. But the full story of the hero's journey isn't just the slaying the dragon. The whole reason you go to the dragon is that's where the gold is. And so you slay the dragon and then you bring the gold back to the villagers to share so that people can, not be in poverty anymore. And so in a way, the whole point of going out and testing yourself isn't just for yourself. It's so that you have something to offer when you come back. And being plugged in as a school teacher gives me a constant opportunity to share those stories and the wisdoms and the perspectives with my students. And so they fuel each other.
Yeah.
I'm more empowered to go do big things because I know I have a reason to come back. And also, like, I'm more excited about my teaching because I have real actual stories to share instead of just like, here's a book, read it. It's
so true.
I think that
I love
the two are so important.
I love that analogy of, bringing back something that you can bring back to them. And but yeah, there's something about athlete. You can tell when there's athletes or individuals who have that in the back of their mind, and that's their driving force. And I think that's what separates the good from the great, is people who are doing it not just for themselves. It's an extrinsic motivation, something that's really going to put a smile on their face, not just putting up that feat, getting that fastest known time. It's, how many people you can impact outside of just yourself as well. So, inspiring to say the least, because you're doing a pretty phenomenal job. I know I'm fired up right now. I want to scale some mountains. Your girlfriend's also a badass. She's scaled 50 some FKTs. Like, you just power couple that just goes out on weekends and crushes mountains. Like, give me some insights here. How are you guys? Like, I feel like I'd be intimidated if I was going on a double date with you two.
No, we're goofy and funny. We're ridiculously affectionate, probably to an annoying degree. Yeah, but no, she's awesome. She's an absolute crusher. She's so strong. A huge part of this Bulgers effort, to get a little into the Bulgers 100, kind of the behind the scenes. If the next person who tries to come and beat me does not have a badass support person like her, there's no way they're coming close to that mark, because there were times she backpacked like 20 miles into the backcountry on a trail so that I could do like a big link up of like 5 peaks. And instead of having to then come out those 20 miles that she went in, I could just drop to the trail right there, camp, resupply, and then take off from that point and do the next 5 on the ridge line and save like 40 miles in and out. Because she was willing to hike with a heavy pack on her back, and not just be willing, she actually enjoys it. Like that's enjoyable to her. And so it's really cool to have someone who we align so well. And, we bothered to check that on the front end. Like, the way we started spending time with each other was going on adventures. It was like every few weeks, it's like, hey, you want to go on, go rock climbing? Oh, you want to go climb Shasta? You want to go do this? And so we just kept going on adventures. And after a while, it's like, hey, this is going pretty well. This is kind of rad. Like, let's go do more stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, she's really awesome. And yeah, she hosts her own podcast, Women of the Wild. She's really involved with the Women Who FKT movement. And yeah, has the most FKTs of any woman. So yeah.
Incredible. It's so important having that accountability partner. And sometimes it can be, a form of whatever, your workout buddy, whoever it is. But if it can be that person that you're waking up beside every morning and motivates you and understands you from an internal point of view, it can be a game changer. And I think obviously you figured that out. I'm curious, 100 fastest known times, how many Athletic Brewing beers did you crush along that journey?
Oh my goodness. I think I was only like 30 something FKTs deep when I got introduced to Athletic Brewing. I was on the Adventure Sport podcast with Mason, a fabulous podcast. And at the end of the show, he's like, hey, would you like to try some non-alcoholic beer? And I was like, I'd never heard about it, but sure, why not? Like, I'll try anything. And I really liked it. And he's like, hey, do you want to be one of our ambassadors? And, I was just kind of one of the normal ambassadors for a while, but they were still really small back then. Like probably people now that are bumping into Athletic Brewing don't understand just how insanely fast they've grown. They were a one small brewery company that shipped to a few states when I joined them. I like had a direct line of communication with Bill, the founder, and like was just emailing back and forth about my adventures and and eventually that's what led to the film. Is he's like, this is epic, like what you're doing is insane, we have to do something with this. But anyways, over the time I've known them, they now have 3 breweries, each one basically double the size or triple the size of the last one, and they're now shipping to every state and internationally. This last year they were like Times Magazine top 100 most influential companies. It's like, so it's like Apple, Google, Athletic Brewing. It's like, what?
Decent company.
And they only make non-alcoholic beer, right? Like, who would have thought?
Hey, I think there's something to be said, and there's a reason they've grown so much so quickly. There's a reason you're drinking it right now. It's because it is something you can consume throughout the day. It doesn't have the negative impacts of alcohol, which I notice now more than ever. I'll be honest, I like went through school, did the whole partying thing, and like, man, I can't even look at alcohol and not feel the effects of it, the negative effects that is, right? And I just like, I realize now the importance of treating your body properly. And when you're putting poison into your body, it's not going to perform well. So, you know, I figure when I'm chatting with incredible high performers like yourself, I better not be in a slightly less high performance state. But you have so many other projects going on. You're working with Koros, Gnarly Nutrition, Peak Refuel. Like, how are you able to manage all of these spinning plates that are in the air as you try and climb mountains and teach kids how to run and play? Like, you've got all of this stuff. Are you insanely organized? Is your time management calendar filled? Like, what's the method to the madness?
It's kind of the opposite. I'm not a very organized person. I mean, most ADHD people aren't. Like in my office around me, if people are looking at video, I don't know if anybody's going to see this, but it's a mess around me. It's not super structured, super organized. And I know that about myself. And so, I mean, I have some systems set up to make sure I don't miss anything catastrophic on an organizational level. But where my strength is I'm super good at being in the moment. I'm super good at being 100% invested in the moment. Like I can focus in 100%. So with relationships, I'm able to be really authentic, and I'm able to go and really dial in and go, this is what I want to say right here and now. This is what's important. And so I'm kind of able to shift between things in order of importance. And I've kind of learned to like flow through that. Like, oh yeah, I need to connect with, Peak Refuel about getting some of their awesome backcountry meals, because I'm going to do a 7-day push, and they're going to love this effort and the story that I'm going to tell out of it. So like be able to, be 100% like, hey, this is what's going down. And yeah, I mean, is it chaotic? Yeah, sometimes it's chaotic, but I mean, in a way, I think that's the superpower that allowed me to do something like the Washington's 100 highest peaks. I mean, I had to account for the peaks that were most likely to have a fire closure, right? Like if a fire broke out, then the land would get closed and the whole effort would be over. And I had to account for like glacier melt and all these different routes, and which routes I needed rock gear on, which routes I needed ice gear on, which routes had a lot of bushwhacking or route finding, orienteering. So it's like all this chaotic stuff, and having to have like these chess pieces in my mind where it's like, okay, need a partner for this peak. Oh, don't have a partner on this day. Well, then that means this peak moves in front of it because I don't need a partner because it's a safer peak. And so being able to deal with this sort of chaos, but have things flow in my mind in a way where I'm just at peace with it. I think it's kind of a superpower of the ADHD mindset, where I can just be like in this state and like reach in and go, yeah, this is what needs to happen now.
Absolutely.
And I think that definitely took some honing and some development over the course of my life. Like if someone's young listening to this right now and they're like, I can't get my homework assignments in, I'm failing school. It's like, well, yeah, you have to put some effort in and create some systems and kind of come to understand yourself a bit, and how to like tailor that hyper focus and that like chaos around you into something. But in different contexts, it can be a superpower instead of a liability. And I think that's a really important takeaway from my story and the roadmap my life makes for other young people. There's a way to channel that in to do things that someone who's, busy getting every piece of paperwork just right isn't going to have time to do. So yeah, I guess that's how I'd answer that question.
My mom is also a teacher, now principal, but she called it organized chaos. And it was something that I realized at an early age that I kind of had the same kind of need to get things done, but I wasn't organized either. And I think it was a defining moment when I realized, okay, I'm not going to be perfect at this, but I can still get things done in a timely manner. And if I do that, I'm going to be okay. So I liked where your head was at there. And I think you did a great way of describing it, much better than I did. But how do you fuel your body for these insane events? Like, you've got crazy long journeys, physically demanding, time consuming. Like, how many calories are you taking in on a daily basis? Are you measuring your nutrition intake? Like, I just fascinated at these ultra events that take hours to accomplish, when people are like, man, I'm toast after a 15-minute run right now. Like, my cardio isn't necessarily where I'm putting a lot of my effort, but like, I can't even imagine how much food you're having to consume just to stay present, to your point.
Yeah. I mean, it's not unheard of to have a 5,000 to 10,000 calorie day.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically what most people would, on that 10,000 calorie end, that's basically what most people would eat for 5 days, right? That's the standard American, calorie consumption is 2,000 calories a day is what they say. So yeah, that's 5 days of food in one day. So that's no easy feat when you really start to think like, wait a minute, if you're moving the whole day for 16 hours of the day, where do you get the time to then eat 5 days worth of food? So it is a task. And you mentioned Gnarly Nutrition. That's one of the companies that really makes a difference for me. I love their Fuel 2O product. You mix it in with your water in your water bladder or in a bottle. And it does your calories. It has some BCAAs in it for like keeping the muscle breakdown from happening.
Right.
And it has all of your electrolyte needs. So it's like I mix that in, and it accomplishes two things. It's like, one, I know if I'm drinking, I'm getting my baseline calories for that hour. As long as I drink correctly, I get calories correctly. But on the other end of that, it also allows me to carry a much smaller pack into the backcountry, because instead of having to pack all these different foods and food packaging, it's like, oh, I just need some dry powder, a few extra scoops of dry powder. And, the Cascades are called the Cascades for a reason in Washington. There's water cascading everywhere. So at any one of those, I can refill the water and I just pour the powder in that's already measured out, and boom, I've got my calories for the next hour or next 2 hours.
Phenomenal.
Then beyond that, we are not machines. We are human beings. And so what I realized is important is having foods that are there for the psychological benefit, right? Because we all, I mentioned it earlier in this podcast, like we all look forward to having a tasty burger, or looking forward to like whatever that favorite meal is. So kind of knowing that about yourself, like what are the things I crave? And for me, there's basically 3 categories. I have a sweet tooth.
Okay.
My mother gave me a sweet tooth, a terrible sweet tooth. So I have to have something sweet with me. And then for when I get burned out on the sweet, something savory is nice to have, whether it's, salami, jerky, something, whatever it is, salty snack. And then I tend to crave the texture of crunchy. So as long as I have those 3 things, even though I don't necessarily need the calories from them while I'm out there, I have those where it's like, oh yeah, once I get to the top of this peak, or I get to this pass, or I merge with the trail, I'm going to have, I can't wait for a handful of, Chex Mix, or a handful of beef jerky, or whatever, like that, whatever the taste is, the thing I'm craving. Then it's like, it creates that little extra mental boost. And so that's how I do it when I'm in the backcountry. And then when I came out, so say during the Bulgers effort, where it's like, oh yeah, this isn't just a one and done effort. I have to like do this in a way that's sustainable for 50 days continuously. It was a game of like just eating as much as I could at the end of every effort. And sometimes that was clean and healthy food if that was available. But other times it was like, all right, we're in the middle of nowhere and this is a gas station with like gas station pizza. And I'm going to eat like an entire pizza and Oreos covered in Nutella. And there were times it was like, holy crap, I'm like some kind of teenager again.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was a lot to try to put in those calories, and then still get enough sleep and then wake up and repeat the next day.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, like when you're not doing these crazy feats, how are you managing the major swings? Like, because I'm assuming you go drop the calories down, your body's probably in a major recovery mode. You're like, oh my gosh, like you're in the middle of a PE class, you're probably cramping up randomly. Like I can't even imagine the need for just constant recovery and different modalities that are keeping your body primed for success, because at a moment's notice, you might have to go climb one of Washington's tallest peaks.
Self-care is absolutely important. I mean, getting enough sleep is, for any athlete, I know it's like so dumb to hear it again, but it's like, if you're not attending to your sleep, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're going to diminish your benefits from it. And obviously I had to cut sleep sometimes when I was mid-effort. That was part of the game, right? That's how the game is played. In order to get the most optimal time, there were occasions, especially toward the end, where it's like, oh yeah, I'll sleep for the 3 hours that the car is driving to the next mountain. But then as soon as the car stops, I'm going, and then repeat that for like the last 7 peaks. And it's like, sometimes it's like in life, you make decisions to do things that aren't healthy for you. Yeah. But it's like, at least it was something cool and I wasn't just out partying until 3 a.m.
Yeah.
So yeah. But yeah, as far as like recovering after an effort, it's like, yeah, you've got to make sure you're getting balanced nutrition, you're getting your micronutrients, you're getting your macronutrients. I mean, there's 1,000 people who are better at articulating it scientifically than me. I'm a fairly intuitive eater. And I just kind of monitor, like, okay, am I getting, like my sweet tooth? Yeah. If I'm not out running a bunch, if I'm not out running 100 miles, it's like, okay, my sweet tooth can get the better of me. I can have I could eat 3 desserts a day easily and not even pay attention to it. And then it's like, wait a minute, I'm in a bad habit now. So it's like, there's certain things. And again, this comes down to like kind of learning yourself, I would say. And that's part of becoming an athlete, is you're treating yourself like someone you have to take care of, right? Like you think of that friend that has stuff go wrong in life, or like gets themselves off the rails, that you have to kind of look out for, that you care for, that loved one or whatever. It's you kind of have to treat yourself the same way. It's like, all right, what are my usual ways of getting off the rails? How do I have to help myself out? Like, oh yeah, I have too much of a sweet tooth, so I need to watch that. And I need to make sure that instead of, eating 3 desserts a day, I'm getting, my leafy greens and my protein.
Yeah.
So yeah, you just kind of learn those things over time. And I think for different people, it's different things. Like, my girlfriend, her thing is she absolutely loves crunchy and salty stuff. So it would be really easy for her to eat nothing but chips all day. Like if she wasn't paying attention, she would admit herself, like, that's the thing that would get her. So that's what she has to pay attention to. Like, okay, yeah, I'll buy the small bag of chips. I won't buy the big bag of chips, because if I buy the big bag of chips, that's all I'm eating all day. So it's like, you learn those little things.
That self-awareness is so key in any situation. And like you said, it's part of becoming an athlete, and there's different athletes at different stages. And you can tell pretty quickly by the way someone eats, by the way someone trains, by the way they interact with their coaches, their teammates. You can tell who's more developed, who's cognizant of what their impact is on the team and their greater impact outside of it. Growing up in Vancouver, British Columbia, I was fortunate to be able to climb mountains on every weekend, similar to the way you were. Got to go up Grouse, Whistler, the Chief up in, sorry, I can't even, Squamish. Man, I can't believe I blanked on that. And just beautiful, incredible views at the top of every mountain that I was fortunate to go up. For you, having done well over 100, how are there any that just in particular stand out? Do you have a favorite that was like breathtaking? And I'd love to hear that, and maybe maybe the best story that you have from those 100 peaks.
Okay. So yeah, from the Bulger's 100 peaks, I'll do a 2-for-1. I'll do a 2-for-1.
Perfect.
I'll answer both in one, because I have got a mountain with a great view, and it's a hell of a story. So we had to do the Chilean group. So portions, the thing about the Washington Bulgers list is it's not like, say, climbing the Colorado 14ers or something, where most of the time you're just like driving to a trailhead and going up a trail, and then maybe you have to scramble a little bit here and there, but mostly there's a trail to the top. It's like, no. If you're very generous with your definition of a trail, and I mean very generous, there are 4 of these peaks that have a trail to the top.
Wow.
Most people say 2 of them have a trail to the top.
Whoa.
The rest you are bushwhacking through, and Washington is a temperate rainforest, right? It's like, it's not open forest walking, which some people call bushwhacking. It's bushwhacking. Like, you can't see, often you can't see 10 feet in front of you. Yeah, it's like you're disappearing into the jungle. So you've got that. You've got glacier travel, where you have to like avoid crevasses and falling in and dying. You have to know how to use crampons and ice axes. There's miles and miles of rock climbing and scrambling, where it's like, if you mess up, you can fall and end up in the hospital or worse. It's a very real peak list. And so the access is really difficult. So back to the Chilean story, it's a group where it's like, you have to ride a boat 20 miles in to get off to start hiking 12 miles of a forest road, just to get to the base of the trail that takes you up to the glacier, that then you cross, and then you rock climb the rest of the way to the summit for the first peak, and that's Copper Peak. And the thing about this is, a lot of people during the Bulgers effort are like, wow, you got really lucky. It hardly rained on you. It was like a record dry year for Washington. It's like, yeah, but there was one other record broken, and that was the heat record. And so as we started this day on this totally exposed 12 miles with 3,000 feet of vert up from Lake Chelan, it was 115 degrees.
Oh,
115 degrees. And so we're climbing up this thing, and it's like, when it's that hot, you just like sort of feel yourself disappearing inside. It's like your consciousness is disappearing inside you, and you start to feel far away from your fingertips and far away from your like own, like just sinking inside. It's like you're disappearing. And so it's just like this hollowed version of yourself hiking uphill for hours and hours. And even when we got to the summit of Copper Peak that day, it was still like 90 degrees at 8,000 feet or whatever we were. We were just shy of, just like about 8,500. But that's not the crazy part of the story. That's just the entry. And we had to do this whole loop during this heat wave in the backcountry, because there's no easier way to do these peaks. So it's like, no, we're committed, and this is when we have to do it, because this is when the boat ride was. And so we finish that peak, we go back down, we try to get a little bit of sleep as much as we could in the heat next to this, like laying right next to this raging creek, because now the glaciers are melting heinously fast because it's ridiculously hot and there's still a lot of snow up there. And so we lay next to this raging creek, like, I hope we don't get swept away, but at least it's a little bit cooler. And the next morning, and this is where the story gets interesting, because it hasn't been interesting yet. We wake up and we have to get 3 peaks that day. Again, still like 100 whatever degrees, and we have to go get 3 peaks that day. And we start the hike up, and I'm like half asleep because of like the heat and like the lack of sleep. And I almost walk into a black bear, like from, it's like 10 feet away, and I'm like, whoa, and luckily it was like, whoa, and it ran off, and I was like, okay, good, back to hiking. So we tagged Martin, and Martin went fairly uneventfully. That was the first peak that day we had to climb, but then we had to climb one called Bonanza. And Bonanza Peak is the tallest non-volcano peak, non-volcanic peak of the whole thing. So it's like, you're going to be up there, right? It's this amazing view, but you have to cross what are called the waterfall slabs. And again, raging heat with a lot of snow. The waterfall slabs are like a freaking dam with its spillway open. It's just pouring off of this thing. And so we're like climbing 4th class and 5th class moves with just like raging water going by as we're moving our way up these slabs, and then finding places to like jump over over it on like snow and glacier. And it's just like, whoa, like this is unreal. And we work our way up the glacier and like navigate around the crevasses in the glacier. And then we finally get up to the proper rock climbing of the route. And it was perfect. It was in perfect condition. And we were up high enough that it was a bit cooler. It was like 80 something degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And so we fly up to the top of this thing, after all this slow navigation to not get washed off, and just have a phenomenal climb. We get to the top of Bonanza and the view is just awesome. The last peak we have to get that day is Dark Peak. And the way we wanted to do it is a famed traverse called the Bonanza Dark Traverse. And we're sitting up there, and I'd done a bunch of reading on it because it's like one of the most technical aspects of the whole project. It's like a razor ridge line where you've got 1,000 feet of air on either side. Okay. And so it's like very real, like high consequence terrain. And not all the rock is totally stable. Some of it's rotten, typical of the Cascades. Like not every hold can be trusted. But we like look down at our watches and it's like, hey, wait a minute. We have like 3 hours and 15 minutes of daylight left. And I kind of have the realization, it's like, wait a minute, every report I'd ever read of the Bonanza Dark Traverse, it took the team 6 hours to do it.
Wow.
I don't want to be up here on exposed terrain in the dark after we're already exhausted and sleep deprived in the heat. It's like, we got to go. Like, we just got to get into a flow and go. And so we just like pedal to the metal, just get into a flow state, get into a rhythm. And we're just like flying, doing all these like rock climbing moves. We never pulled a rope out or put a piece of protection in for the whole traverse, just like soloed the whole thing, just kind of in a flow state. We ended up climbing it in about 2 hours and 58 minutes. It's about a mile long of this just highly technical terrain. So absolutely smashed what anybody had done on it. And we get to Dark Peak right as it's getting dark and the sun is starting to like set. And then we have to like in the waning light with the final color, kind of the golden hour, we're coming down the dark glacier. And yeah, just a phenomenal memory. Just an amazing part of the experience.
Incredible. You are one of the most articulate storytellers I've had the opportunity to chat with. Wisdom from over a decade of teaching future generations, 2 decades of unbelievable experiences in extreme wilderness spaces. Jason, the way we wrap up every episode of the Athletes Podcast is we ask our guest what their biggest piece of advice would be for the next generation of athletes. And I'd love for you, with your plethora of knowledge, experience, and wisdom, to share what you think would be the most impactful message to leave our listeners with.
I would say this. I would say set your aims based on 2 things. 1, make 8-year-old you proud. Aim in a way that would make 8-year-old you, that kid that loved running around on the playground or whatever he or she loved doing. Make that little kid proud with what you're aiming at and who you're going to become with what you're going to put effort into. And 2, aim in such a way that 80-year-old you is going to be happy and not have regrets with how you spent the time. And if you can do that, and if you can find a process that leads to those 2 things, you've got it.
I love it. Jason Hardrath, thank you so much for coming on the Athletes Podcast. I very much look forward to the opportunity to potentially scale a mountain with you in the future in the Pacific Northwest. Thanks again so much for coming on. Really appreciate your time.
An absolute pleasure.
Thank you, folks, for tuning into the 129th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Jason Hardrath. I don't know about you guys, but I'm ready to go climb a mountain, scale the face of a rock, simply because what Jason described over these past 54 minutes was mind-boggling. Washington's 100 tallest peaks in 50 days, 23 hours. I've done like one of them, and I was gassed. Can't even imagine what it would be like to do that in less than 51 days. But we appreciate you folks tuning in, listening to this show, watching, consuming, wherever you are taking in the Athletes Podcast content. We really appreciate it. We hope you come back for more. Please don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, comment your favorite part. It'll help us in continuing to make this incredible show continue to occur. Jordan Maslin is our producer. I'm David Stark, your host. Thank you, folks, for tuning in again. Hope you have a great rest of your day.